Welcome back! Now that you've acquainted yourself with the basic concepts of Highfleet, a game all about aerial warships, it's time to talk about the capital purpose of said ships, that is to say, more specifically, the most direct form of war, tactical combat or simply dogfights. Once you enter a dogfight, your objective is very clear and simple. Eliminate the enemy ships while preserving your own. Well, for starters, how does one kill a ship? The obvious answer would be by shooting it until it dies. However, to master dogfights, it's important to understand what actually leads to a ship's destruction. Remember, all of the vessels in Highfleet are made up of individual parts, and each part has its very specific defined purpose. Engines keep the ship in the air and allow it to move. Destroy all the engines on one side and you will destabilize the ship, causing the crew to lose control and netting you a kill. Generators provide electricity to all of a ship's systems, so destroy all of them and the engines will no longer have power, and the ship will dumbly plummet out of the sky like an aluminium brick. Alternatively, the bridge houses all of a ship's command and crew, so blow up the bridge and there will be no one left to fight you. 8 times out of 10 you will probably kill enemy ships by just destabilizing them, but it's important that you remember the moment you engage an enemy in combat, look for one of these 3 goals to achieve. Either destroy all the engines on one side, blow up the generators, or blow up the bridge. Whichever is easier, that is what you aim for. Rather obviously though, there will be things impeding you from achieving those goals. For example, armor. Armor is very resistant and blocks all splash damage from traveling past it. It can be pierced by armor-piercing munitions, but is more often than not just circumvented or destroyed. Now let's talk about the armaments you'll be using to deal all this damage. In Highfleet there are 8 gun systems barring the A220 MLRS, which is honestly a fucking meme, each chambering a different caliber and serving a different purpose. The 2A37 is a 6-barreled rotary cannon firing 37mm shells at a very fast rate and with low accuracy. It holds a total of 50 rounds in its ammo cassette and reloads at a rate of 2.5 rounds per second, taking 20 seconds to fully reload. Really important to understand, this weapon is not for taking down other ships. While yes, in a pinch against small unarmored ships it can work, this weapon's main purpose is as a defensive implement for shooting down missiles, higher caliber shells and planes. 37mm shells are absolutely useless against armor, they will literally not even dent it. They do not deal splash damage, but the gun's high spread will just about compensate for that. 37mm shells also come in the incendiary variety, which will set on fire any unarmored part of a ship that they hit. The 2A37 traverses very quickly and it's designed to intercept fast-moving targets. The AK-725 Wimpel is a twin 57mm autocannon turret. It fires at a slower rate of 350 rounds per minute and holds up to 14 rounds in its ammo cassette, reloading them at a rate of 1.4 rounds per second and taking 10 seconds to fully reload. An interesting note is that the 57mm shells it fires are the fastest projectiles in game, theoretically making shots easier to hit with the AK-725. Technically, this gun is supposed to be a multi-purpose stopgap between the defensive 2A37 and other higher caliber cannons, effective both as a defense against missiles and shells and a more potent anti-ship weapon. In reality though, its lackluster accuracy and low damage per shot and the need to fire long extended volleys make it a mediocre anti-ship weapon, useful only against unarmored targets, and its slower rate of fire and smaller ammo capacity make it subpar at shooting down missiles. Oh, and you can't forget about intercepting shells with this thing. Jack of two trades, master of none. Besides normal HE, the 57mm shell only comes in incendiary variety. They deal no splash damage and are totally useless against armor. Next up we have the AK-100. It is a twin 100mm autoloading cannon turret. It holds 4 shells in its cassette, which it fires very quickly and with very high spread, and reloads just as fast in around 7 seconds. The 100mm deals a good amount of splash damage in a small area around it, and they are very effective against unarmored hulls. It is best to think of this weapon less like a cannon and more like a shotgun. where each volley is one shell. It has very high burst damage but very low accuracy. At range it's ineffective due to how hard it is to hit shots reliably, however up close a single volley can shred an enemy ship. Due to its larger caliber, it is not totally useless against armor. It can break it, but requires multiple shells on the same small area, which is hard to achieve with its high spread. Besides HE and Incendiary, 100mm shells are also available as proximity fuse shells, which burst when close to a target, launching a cone of shrapnel 30 degrees in front of them. Extremely powerful against agile and unarmored ships, or as armor-piercing rounds which have a much higher velocity and will penetrate armor, dealing damage to the systems underneath it without needing to destroy it. These specific 100mm AP shells, however, have a very short range, and the gun's innate inaccuracy doesn't make them very effective. The D80 Molot is a 130mm autoloading cannon. It has a steady, controllable rate of fire and holds 4 rounds in the cassette, taking exactly 10 seconds to fully reload them. This weapon is extremely accurate and effective at longer ranges provided you can hit your shots. Its 130mm shells deal good splash damage and strike a great balance between damage and velocity, making this weapon very good at breaking enemy armor, but also great at damaging unarmored targets. One caveat is that these guns traverse noticeably slower, so you will have to wait for your weapons to line up with your aim point when quickly changing targets. The 130mm ammo is available in Incendiary and Armor Piercing, which due to the higher caliber and this gun's superb accuracy can be very effective for sniping out weak spots like the bridge or the ammunition magazines through an enemy's armor, proximity fuse, and laser guided shells, which follow your aim point after being fired and deal huge amounts of damage, somehow. They are however extremely expensive, so I recommend using them sparingly only against high value targets. And lastly, we have the family of high caliber guns. They all fire 180mm shells, which are available in all varieties mentioned above. They deal large amounts of damage with an extended splash range, and theoretically are the best at destroying armor. However, these shells are very slow and large, making them easy to intercept and harder to land at range. The Mark I is the basic bitch, a single barrel cannon. One shell is all you get before you have to reload, which takes 6¼ seconds. Like all 180mm guns, it traverses very slowly, so be mindful of that. The Mark II Sarmat is a bit more competitive. It is twin barreled, so you have 2 shots that you can fire relatively quickly before needing to reload. It also reloads a tiny bit faster than the Mark I, taking only 5 seconds per shell, so 10 seconds to fully reload. If you want to rock high caliber artillery, this is the gun to get. And finally we have the Mark VI Squall, which... Unlike other weapons, it must be emplaced on a large 4x4 hull piece, limiting its use only to very large cruisers. Absolutely devastating, but hard to field practically. Besides guns, there are also tactical, as in usable in dogfight, missiles. The R5 Zenith is an infrared guided missile. It can be launched in combat and it guides itself to the ship which you highlighted when it was launched. It's rather slow and not very agile, so it can reliably be avoided by maneuvering and soft killed by IRCM flares, which you can fire if your ship has an ASO-75 launcher by pressing F. You will need to fire multiple for them to be effective. They're also very vulnerable to 37mm fire, but this is actually a good thing because the enemy will be launching many more of these at you than you will be at them. When they do hit, however, they hit like a truck, and their hollow charge warhead penetrates armor in a straight line from where they hit, so if they hit at a good angle, even your cuirass won't save you. Generally, they are not worth using, as they are expensive and unreliable. Your enemy, however, will throw these at you like pebbles, so be prepared for that. One last thing to mention are active protection systems, or APSs. If you ever see an aura like this around part of a ship, that designates the operational area of an APS. The APS will automatically shoot down any shell 100mm or higher caliber that enters this area. They have 2 shots and they will actually replenish automatically after around 20 seconds during a dogfight. They can be very effective against high caliber artillery, but it's important to keep in mind that they will not intercept 37 or 57mm shells. They will also shoot at missiles but cannot destroy them, and proximity fuse ammunition completely bypasses them as the shells burst before they actually reach the active area. Good. Now that all of the theoretical considerations are out of the way, let's talk about how you actually get in a dogfight and what all of this means in practice. When a group of your ships make contact with a group of enemy ships in the strategical mode, you will immediately enter what is known as a mild disagreement. The sole purpose of which is to get your enemy to stop disagreeing with you via the process known as spontaneous combustion. Before you get to any fighting, however, you'll be greeted with this screen letting you know of the composition of the enemy's formation, i.e. what ships were in their group, and here at the top you can decide the order that your ships go into battle and also assign different types of ammunition to each ship. Once you've done all that, you'll be given a very zoomed out view of the airspace and given direct control of the first ship in your lineup. You can obviously only control one ship at once, while the enemies can have up to 3 ships present in the airspace at a time, so be ready for that. If you deem it necessary, you can retreat the current ship you are controlling by flying it to the retreat zone at the edge of the screen. If you do this, the next ship in the lineup will enter the battle and you will be given control of it. Obviously, this also happens if your ship gets destroyed. If there are no more ships left to get into battle after your ship gets destroyed or retreats, then the battle will be over and you will be forced to retreat from the engagement. Now let's talk about controls. Obviously you move your ship with W, A, S and D, but I really want you to think of it more as controlling your thrusters rather than directly moving your ship. Remember that Highfleet is physics based, so the direction that your ship moves is actually determined by the direction that your thrusters are firing in and how hard they are firing. You might notice, for example, that while trying to get your ship to start moving left from moving right, your ship will slightly be jostled upwards because the thrusters will be briefly pointing downwards as they turn towards the right. Next up, you can move your mouse to aim your guns. The direction they're pointed is indicated by the green arrow around your ship. Before you do any fighting, however, I heavily recommend that you go into settings and change the crosshair length to long. This will make it much easier to aim, which is borderline impossible with just a simple arrow. You fire your main guns by pressing the left mouse button, and if your ship is equipped with secondary gun mounts, you can fire those by pressing the right mouse button. What will probably immediately happen in your first dogfight is that a stray 57mm will find its way into one of your fuel tanks and you will be given this prompt.
The fuel system is burning.
If one of your fuel tanks gets hit, a fire is very likely to break out, starting from the initial fuel tank and then slowly spreading to other parts of your ship. Not only do fires do damage over time, but they can also impair the function of some systems. For example, engines which are on fire will start to overheat, limiting your ability to maneuver. Weapon systems will enter a safety lockdown, not allowing you to fire them even if they are loaded. And autoloaders will malfunction, preventing you from reloading your guns. Thankfully, most ships are equipped with fire suppression tanks. They look like this. And pressing B will disperse halon over the fires, immediately putting them out, but consuming one of the tanks. Meaning that you are limited in how many times you can put out fires by the amount of tanks you have installed. Do note that on larger ships, one tank might not be enough to put out all of the fires and multiple might need to be consumed in different parts of the ship. Don't worry, your fire suppression systems will be refilled by your crew when not in battle, but if they get destroyed in the battle, say by an enemy shell, they will need to be replaced. You may notice that when aiming at an enemy ship, they will be highlighted by this green reticle. The highlighted ship will be displayed in the bottom right corner so that you can see their status and systems, and will also be the ship that missiles which you fire will be locking onto. Talking about the status monitors in either of the bottom corners, they provide extremely useful information. The one in the left corner is your own ship and the one in the right is the enemy's ship, but they all provide information in the exact same way. Firstly, in the middle you will have a diagram of the entire ship, which also shows its inclination. Different parts are color coded appropriately. armor is highlighted in white, ammunition magazines in yellow, and fuel tanks in blue. The rest of the hull is represented as grey, but that doesn't mean it is not important. There are certain parts like the engines or the bridge which are very important to keep track of. Damage done to the various parts will obviously be highlighted as the part in question turns more and more red. Now, up and to the right of the middle diagram, you have information about the ship's other armaments. GPB stands for General Purpose Bombs, which are Fab 1000s that can be dropped upon your enemies when they are landed.
Kill confirmed.
ASM stands for Anti-Ship Missiles, and it refers to the R5 Zeniths that I've just talked about. And AAM stands for Anti-Air Missile or Air-to-Air Missile, which are defensive missiles meant for intercepting other missiles or planes. Moving straight down from here, you have another set of information detailing the ship's system. Fuel is self-explanatory. FSS stands for Fire Suppression System, and it refers to how many of the Halon tanks that I've talked about earlier you still have filled or available for use. And evac stands for the number of evacuation pods that are present on your ship. Each pod can hold up to 30 crew members, and you can evacuate your ship early by pressing T, though this basically means resigning and giving up that specific ship, which is basically never a good idea. Fight till the bitter end. So, one of the most important aspects of Highfleet tactical combat is proper maneuvering. Thankfully, you have something called afterburners to help you with this. By pressing shift, you will inject extra fuel into the exhaust of your engines after it's passed through the combustion chamber, hence the name afterburner. This will guzzle up a lot of fuel and raise the temperature of your engines. However, it will allow you to squeeze a lot more thrust out of those engines than you normally could for a brief period. The extra thrust you get from the afterburners is best used for defeating your inertia in order to quickly reposition rather than constantly moving fast. I cannot stress this enough, do not try to use the afterburners to zoom around the map, you will just overheat your engines. Instead, use them in short controlled bursts in order to make your ship come to a standstill faster or make it accelerate from a standstill much faster. Proper use of the afterburners is key to dodging shells and missiles. By far the best approach to winning dogfights, and even the game tells you this, is fire and maneuver. Load up your ammo cassette, basically prepare a salvo, getting close enough to the enemy that you know you can reliably hit them. Obviously you aim for their weak spot, whatever that may be, whether you want to destroy the engines, blow up the bridge, maybe shoot for the ammunition or destroy their generators. Fire off your salvo, and then immediately maneuver while the enemy will try to shoot at you. While you are maneuvering and evading their shots, you will be automatically reloading, and once you are reloaded, go in again and repeat the whole cycle. Once you get good enough that you can reliably dodge enemy shots, which will not actually take as long as you might think, the only limiting factor in tactical combat for you then will be your fuel. So it is important to become disciplined in how to best conserve your fuel. Dodging enemy attacks is quite easy once you get used to it, however doing it efficiently is not. For example, when an enemy ship is about to shoot at you, instead of dodging so wide that you get really far away from the ship and by the time that you have reloaded you will need to fly back in closer to it, try to stay as close as you can while reliably dodging. Use your afterburners to just slightly weave the enemy's attack and then immediately get back into an attack position to retaliate. This way you will take a shorter path around the enemy ship and you will expend way less fuel changing your direction and cancelling your inertia with afterburners. So the most important thing to do when dodging is try to do tight, short dodges. Don't do wide swings around the enemy. For dodging missiles, which you will be doing a lot of by the way, the best advice I can give you is to keep in mind how these missiles actually technically track you. In their nose they have an IR camera that detects the heat from your engines, which pivots on a 30-degree gimbal mount. This basically means that in front of any enemy missile you have a 30-degree cone. As long as you are inside this 30-degree cone that stretches out towards infinity, you will be getting tracked by that specific missile. So to make a missile lose lock on you, all you have to do is get out of this 30-degree cone. Because of the way Euclidean geometry works, this will obviously mean that the further you are away from the missile, the harder it is to get out of this range. So you want to wait until the missile is pretty close to you and then start moving towards and to the left or right of it. This will allow you to leave its tracking cone much faster and more reliably. Most importantly, what you want to be doing is to be looking at the technical diagram of the enemy ships and identifying its weaknesses and strong points and then engaging it accordingly. For example, this ship, the Sarma, is heavily armored at the top. However, at the bottom, the armor is much thinner and you can even get a shot on one of its exposed guns or its bridge. So it makes more sense to engage this solely from the bottom. Here it pays to be very astute. Other ships will not have weaknesses that are as readily apparent. For example, look at this Cormoran light cruiser. It is very well armored all around and it has very good armaments. However, you will notice it only has 4 fire suppression tanks. So you don't need to destroy this ship by actually punching through all of that armor and blowing up the bridge or reaching the ammunition. All you really need to do is just set the ship on fire a few times and then it will just be doomed to burn out because it cannot extinguish the fires anymore. Lastly, I want to make it very clear that merely winning a dogfight does not entail victory. Even if you get hit and survive to win the dogfight, your ship may be so banged up that you will have to spend so much time and money to repair it that it will be a detriment to you. You could be staying a whole day in port to repair that thing and an enemy strike group catches up to your whole fleet, for example. The most important thing to do in a dogfight is to not get damaged, and the best way to do so is not to be in that dogfight at all. So pick your fights wisely and remember that at the end of the day, Highfleet is a strategy game. You could be the best in the world at dogfights, but if you keep getting into battles where the odds are stacked against you because the enemy simply has better means than you do, skill alone will not save you. The best thing to do is to never fight unnecessarily and only engage in battles you know you will win. The wise Chinese general Sun Tzu said, "The greatest victory is that which requires no battle." Now good luck out there, and stay tuned for part 3 where we will discuss sensors and information gathering.